In this diagram, we're asked to find x and r, find the exact values of each. On the video prior to this one, there was a chart where we had trig functions of acute angles, trig values of acute angles, and that's the one I made a little comment about doing a Google image, and you could find a really clean chart to print off or just keep on your computer so you could refer to it as needed. For this one, we're given an angle instead of theta, and 30 degrees was one of the columns in that chart from the previous video. It doesn't matter if you go after x or r first, but kind of keep in mind that when we get one of those two, we can use Pythagorean theorem to get the other. I think I'm just going to randomly choose getting x. Now, if you decide to pick x first, and you don't have to, you can do r, but if you decide you want to get x first, from 30 degrees, x is adjacent and 18 is opposite. So if we can think of a trig function that's defined with adjacent and opposite, that'll give us a good start. Personally, I'm thinking tangent. Tangent, remember, it is opposite over adjacent. And we know one of those two, 18 over x. If we multiply both sides by x, that'll give us x tangent 30 is equal to 18. Divide both sides by tangent 30 degrees. When you get ready to put this in your calculator, if you decide to use your calculator, you want to make sure you go to mode and have degrees instead of radians selected. I'm just going to use that chart, tangent 30 was square root of 3 over 3. And just directly plug it in. (18) times 3 over square root of 3, because if you divide by a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal. That's going to give us 54 over square root of 3, rationalized, that is 54 square root of 3 over 3 3 goes into 54 18 times. All right, so that is our value for x. Took a while to get there. Sometimes you just have to be patient. Going back to the original diagram, we know the lengths of the two legs, 18 and 18 square root of 3. That will allow us to find r. R squared will be equal to 18 squared plus 18 square root of 3 squared. 18 squared, I get 324. 18 square root of 3 squared gives me 972. Add that to 324, that's 1296. R is going to be the square root of that. Square root 1296 is 36. And so that's the length of our hypotenuse. And we have found both x and r. You are standing 43 meters from the base of a building. You estimate that the angle of elevation to the top of the 86th floor, the observatory, is 82 degrees. If the total height of the building is another 124 meters above the 86th floor, what is the approximate height of the building? Round your answer to 1 decimal place. Okay, so let's find this value. All right, so from where 82 degrees is marked off, x is opposite, 43 is adjacent. This is by no means drawn to scale, but we have tangent of 82 degrees is equal to x over 43. So that means x is going to be 43 times tangent of 82. Make sure your calculator is in degree mode. 43 tangent of 82 is, and I'm going to keep a few extra decimal places along the way, 14 point, let me make sure I'm in degree mode. I'm actually not. 305, I'm glad I checked, 0.96. That is this value. Total height is 305.96. Which is that x value plus the 124 more meters above, and that was given in the problem. Okay, so what's our grand total? If we add 124, that gives us 429.96. And since we were asked to round to the nearest tenth, the 6 forces the 9 to a 10, so we're actually just going to say 430 meters. One of your friends is on the 86th floor. What is the distance between you and your friend? Well, let's highlight that. All right, here we are. Our friend is on the 86th observatory floor, and we're trying to figure out how far apart they are. I'm going to leave the ink blue for this part of it. Part A in your problem was finding total height of the building approximately. The part B is finding the distance between you and your friend on the observatory floor. All right, now that's the hypotenuse of that right triangle. We just found x, and we have the adjacent side, so that's good news for us. We can find the hypotenuse because that represents the distance between you and your friend. The hypotenuse is going to be equal to 43 squared plus that 305.96 figure. All right, so our hypotenuse is going to be the square root of this grand total. Okay, so be very careful typing this in. I'm going to take just a second to type that in, and we're going to, let's see, we're still supposed to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so square root of 43 squared plus 305.96 squared. I'm getting 308.96. So I'm going to go ahead and call that 309. Because just like above, the 96 rounds it up to the next whole number. Meters. You are skiing down a mountain with a vertical height of 700 feet. The distance from the top of the mountain to the base is 1,400 feet. What is the angle of elevation from the base to the top of the mountain? Okay, so the mountain's 700 feet tall. Skiing from top down to the base, that's 1,400 feet. The angle of elevation is the angle from the base to the top of the mountain, and that's why I put theta in the bottom right corner there. It just depends on how you draw your diagram too. Just be careful. That's the main thing. Okay, now with respect to theta, 700 is opposite, 1,400 is the hypotenuse. Which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. Very good. It's the SO part of SOHCAHTOA. Opposite over hypotenuse, which reduces wonderfully to a 1/2. Using either your chart of trig values of acute angles, and that would be from the last video, or if you Google imaged that, you have a really clean chart to keep handy. You can refer to that as much as you like. Sine theta is equal to a 1/2. If you look in the 30-degree column of that chart, you'll see that sine has a value of 1/2. There is another way to do this on your calculator where, like if your chart's not handy, that's okay, or if you don't have them memorized, you can invert your trig function and that'll give you an angle. Now to invert it, you'll have to hit second and sine on your calculator. And let me do that now. Second, sine, and then you can either type in 1/2 or 0.5, whatever mood you're in. But either way, using a chart, using your calculator, you will get, or should get, 30 degrees. Again, make sure your calculator is in degree mode instead of radian mode. A guy wire runs from the ground to a cell tower. The wire is attached to the cell tower 150 feet above the ground. The angle formed between the wire and the ground is 43 degrees. How long is the guy wire? Okay, so first thing, the guy wire, I'm just going to label it with a W, is the hypotenuse of that right triangle. 150 is opposite of the angle given. What trig function uses opposite, and hypotenuse. Very good. Sine. Sine of 43 degrees will be equal to 150 over W. Multiply by W, and then divide by sine of 43. That's going to give us 150 over sine 43. Okay, so let's see. I'm probably going to need to write that underneath. W is, and again, we're going to go to the nearest tenth. 150 divided by sine 43. I'm getting 219.94. The 4 is not enough to round up, so 219.9 feet. Okay, and again, that is for this portion. We're also asked on part B, how far from the base of the tower is the guy wire anchored to the ground? I'm going to select blue. This is what we're going to find on part B, this distance. Okay, now that's adjacent to the angle, or you can use Pythagorean theorem as well, because if you know 2 of the 3 sides of a right triangle, you can use that to find the third. I'm just going to opt to do another trig function because it never hurts to have some extra practice on setting up the right trig function with the correct ratio. So that is going to be 150 is opposite. That blue line is adjacent. So I'm going to choose tangent and write it up this way. Tangent of 43 is equal to opposite over adjacent. I'm going to go ahead and mark this a little bitty X right in here. Keep it color coded though. Okay. All right, if you multiply both sides by X and then divide by tan 43, similar to the process we did in the black ink above, we're going to get 150 over tan 43. And we're going to round this to the nearest tenth as well. (150) divided by tan 43. Make sure you're in degree mode. 160.9. And that's still in feet.